and it's not an investigation. This was more of a bringing a major news event to light and thinking of a creative way of doing that. And that was the national legalization of marijuana in Canada. So pot is legal everywhere across the country. And
you guys got fire butt up there, bro.
Yeah. It's
like fucking everything. Fluorescent, like hurts my eyes, like special Canada battery bud.
So I had to think of a creative way to be able to tell this story. And Tommy Chong, I thought he's the pot pioneer. Like if there's one guy that really drove home the movement, he got arrested. He went to jail because of it. He's Canadian. So I spent a bit of time with him, documented his life, him and Cheech and Chong. It's an interesting story. It's called The Pot Pioneer.
Welcome to another episode of 2020. I'm Benny Goodman here with my cohorts in crime, Siobhán, Cronin, and Cory Peza. What's going on, guys?
Not much.
Have you subscribed yet? Did you subscribe? 2020-d.com. I'm pulling a Benny this week.
All the cool kids are doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. It's almost as healthy as cigarettes. So with that said, let's move on to something way more healthier with, better healthcare for sure. Canada. Up there in Canada, there's a guy named Paul Haber making really amazing documentaries, bringing, as I want to say non-biased news, but this is biased news. So saying it's non-biased is kind of a biased thing to say. But if there is such thing as non-biased news, it's from Paul Haber.
I think ethical would be a good way. He's fighting for the little guy. It seems to be
Yeah, he tells us a lot more about his process as like an investigative journalist, TV guy, but we also get into a lot more discussion about like differences between the US and Canada, a lot of different, nuances between the news stations. So interesting to hear from a guy that actually works in news and some of his opinions on what goes on.
We tackled some adult topics in this eepisode. It's really weird.
It's
weird for us. Like Big Boy, like we're actually talking about important things instead of like what guitar picks we should be using.
It was nice, though, because it was like a positive conversation that was non-confrontational, but still very informative. It's surprising a nice conversation.
That a Canadian brought that out in us. So Paul Haber, part 2. And if you haven't subscribed already, up there in Canadian land or wherever the fuck you may be, 2020-d.com. Like it, subscribe it, smash it. We said it. Sorry.
Part 2.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of 2020'd. And I just got 2020'd on our last episode because my internet decided to fritz out. So hopefully everyone heard me. But anyway, I'm here once again. I'm Siobhán Cronin with my cohorts, Benny Goodman.
Hello there, Siobhán. I'm so glad you're back.
Way to savor that time. And Cory Peza.
Thank you, Siobhán. Glad to be here. I won't leave the dead air and give a panic attack to the TV
it's
guy.
It's fine. As Ben says, you'll just edit that out anyway. And once again, we're back for part 2 with our incredible guest, Paul Haber, Canadian friend, producer, TV, creator. So many interesting stories that you told us in the first half. Part 1, if you haven't checked it out, please go back, listen to it, listen to what he has to say. Subscribe, of course, to 2020'd, 2020-d.com. We have a lot of amazing guests, but super excited to dive into part 2 with our wonderful guest today. So welcome back for part 2.
Thank you.
Yeah. So at the end of the last part there, we were kind of starting to talk about, what you're doing now, which is the investigative journalism.
Yes.
And what I think would be really interesting is if you could take us through kind of step by step the process that goes, from the inception of an idea through the final broadcast, just to kind of give people a glimpse of what goes into something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I guess if you were listening to part 1, that the stuff that I do now.
Hopefully they subscribe, Paul. That's such a good call. I hope they subscribe. I hope they already know all the aforementioned information. But if they don't, they should stop this now. Go back to 2020-d.com and watch Paul Haber's first episode.
Did I not do a good enough job of this in my intro?
Listen, you got to tell them to the point where we're all annoyed by it because it's called operant conditioning.
Exactly. And that's why I brought it up. Just, a little extra, little bit extra push.
There's a Pavlovian reference, which I appreciate. Because Canadians are actually intelligent because they call it, they're in university as opposed to going to school.
That's actually a big difference. Like, you guys go to college. It's for us, it's always called university.
Right. I think everywhere else it's the same. Americans need to have
so
their own
elitist.
system.
Yes. So the stuff that I do is very different than, say, your local 1.5 minute newscast, and it takes a lot of work to make one of our stories happen, because we're dealing with sometimes very delicate matters, victims, a lot of legal issues that, one slip up and we're sued. A lot of money. If we make a mistake, that's
Is it lucky the Canadians don't really sue that much?
They sue for that stuff. If you make a mistake.
So there's still Jews in Canada.
it's everywhere. Like,
I'd also imagine that you're up against corporations at times as well, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
100%.
They love to sue.
They do. So if you're calling somebody out, you need to be 110% right in everything you do. So that takes a lot of extra time, a lot of extra steps. So basically, if we're doing an investigation, we usually start with the victim, find the people that have been harmed the most by this, and talk to as many people as you can to hear as many stories as you can. And from that group, you take a select few that could really emotionally tell their story. You get their stories down pat, you film their stories, you film parts of their life, and then you go after the people that harm them. And you gotta be fair in how you do that. If somebody's making accusations, I always reach out to people and say, hey, people are accusing you of this. You need to provide a response, because if not, then it's everything that they say, and I don't have a response from you. So that's called fair journalism. Is I need to reach out as hard as I can to anybody I accuse of.
Is that a weird feeling sometimes where you're calling someone and it's like, this person's being accused of rape or double homicide?
Yeah.
You're like, hey, is John home? Is Ed Gein around? Mrs. Gein?
You know what? I have no problem doing stuff like that. I have zero issue confronting people.
Who was the craziest fucker you called and confronted?
This is actually a really weird and funny story. Furnace fraud. I don't know if you have this. People like
what?
People
don't know, but there's furnace fraud because Canadians really tell news.
Yes. So and honestly, it's door-to-door salesmen. Door-to-door salesmen.
Fuckers.
Exactly.
Especially in a COVID world.
So, but this is going back 5 or 6 years. But and actually, since then, the laws have changed because of stuff that we've done.
Door-to-door,
amazing.
Yeah. So there was a lot of unscrupulous door-to-door salesmen that would target elderly people who don't fully understand, target new immigrants, and knock on the door, say we're here to do a furnace inspection. They go down and do an inspection. They tell them that there's a little bit of a gas leak. They tell them how inefficient it is, so on and so forth. They scare the shit out of them and make them buy into a brand new furnace that you have to pay for. Yeah, we'll make it $20 a month for the next 30 years type of thing.
So they own you in perpetuity forever.
Right.
They own you in perpetuity. And it goes beyond that. It goes deeper than that, because the contract that you sign, the fine print gives them access to your house as collateral.
Shut the fuck up.
Crazy.
So I love the fact that you just made me go from being like, what the fuck is up with furnaces to like, wait, they're stealing houses from old people by getting them in on pyramid schemes, by lying about their furnaces and then having them sign power of attorney.
Exactly. So they put liens on people's houses who stop paying, which means they own you can't sell your house if there's a lien on it. You can't do anything if there's a lien on it. And this
is a free country here. I can do whatever I want, Paul.
Not if there's a lien.
Maybe in Canada.
Not if there's a lien. I think even in the US, if there's a lien on your house,
fucking with you.
You're screwed. So people just don't realize that this was happening, and it was pretty rampant. And again, they target people that don't understand. They target people where, yeah, you could smell that little bit of gas coming from there, or, you know, just do small things. Show them a pipe that this is old pipe, this should be new pipe, type of thing. Don't worry, we'll fix this for you. We could do this for like $20 a month.
It's like when you walk into McDonald's, you order something that's not on the menu, but you point
Were
at
these
it.
people
Right.
that were just like unsolicited, like just showing up at your door? I guess door-to-door salesmen, they just show up unannounced.
They just show up,
Yeah.
and if they could get in, all they need to do is get through your front door, and they could convince you. So
Wow.
you know, and a lot of these people, a lot of these salespeople, they knew what they were doing. They for sure knew what they were doing, but they were working underneath levels of other
So
people.
they're like the SS soldiers, and then there's a Hitler somewhere.
Yeah.
So who's the Hitler of Versus?
And I was able to find like a binder that gave them all their sales tactics on how to lie. So I was able to fully expose the whole operation,
That's great.
Wow.
fully
Yeah, what is-
expose everything.
What does
And-
that
What
is
read
the-
like?
What does the investigative process look like for that? Like, how do you plan out how you're going to uncover all the elements of this story?
So, you know what? Sometimes it unfolds in real time. You know, obviously, you know, not instantaneously, but over the span of weeks or months. You know, so you find your victim, you find out what the company was that did this whole agreement. You find out who the salespeople were. You find out who they work for. You find out the shell companies. You have to do tax records. You have to look through court documents. You have to dig through a tremendous amount of stuff to find that main guy that you want to go after.
When you're doing something like that, and you come across something potentially criminal, what kind of obligation or relationship do you have with law enforcement in that regard?
Good question. And you know what? I haven't come across that. If I, you know, if I did find something like morally, I would go to the authorities without a doubt.
Sure.
But typically when it comes to stories like that, we would be working with an authority to, you know, we would have that information from them already. It's very rarely that, you know, we will uncover.
So did you find
Like,
the Kaiser Sose of furnaces, and did you have to confront him or
I did.
her?
So I did, and that's getting back to like you know, a time where I felt sketched out, where I sometimes didn't feel safe. There are times where you just don't feel safe on these things, and you know, like I have to keep.
Is that
I
a
have to keep my-
regular thing in Canada?
Yeah, it's not a regular thing, but there's bad people everywhere. You know, there's always people that will try and get you, no matter what, wherever you are. So you know, you do a bit more digging, and it turns out that you know. There's some mafia involvement in the top levels. And that's when I was like, okay, I'm a little bit nervous.
You don't
here,
want to
but-
disappear, right? Right.
Yeah. But, you know, I kept pushing on. And you know, you make the phone calls and try to get them to talk, and nobody talks, and you leave it at that. But you expose what they were
So
doing.
did you leave it?
Yeah. If you know, ultimately, if nobody's going to talk to you, we showed up at their offices with the cameras rolling. We knock on the door. They see the cameras. They don't open the door. You know, there's times when we wait for them to come out for hours. They run away from the camera.
So is there some Canadian mobster that wants you dead?
Not anymore. There may have been, but you know, that story is but it's just an example of the digging you have to do. You start from the victim typically, and you work backwards, and you know, you uncover all the peels. Like you keep peeling layers
Wait,
off.
why don't you think they're after you anymore?
I don't know. I don't think they are.
Is it just because you think there's too much time?
I just don't think they care.
Okay. Fair enough.
Well, a question for you, when it comes to telling the story, I imagine that the editing process and how it's edited together has a huge impact on how it turns out. I'm wondering, how involved are you in the editing side of things, and, you know, the actual cutting of the film, and, you know, scene to scene, because you can create a vastly different story depending on what material you choose to use.
Absolutely. So again, that's where our sort of team works in conjunction. We have an on-air reporter. That's the person, you know, who fronts the story. I'm behind the scenes, and you know, everybody has different ways of working, but typically we collaborate in script writing, we write the script, and we have everything together, and we have editors that are on staff with us, and at that point we give them we give them what we feel we want to get on air, and then make it come to life. But I'm in the process every step of the way.
Yeah.
With something like that, and just coming from an editing background, with most journalism, there's a high, you have to be ethical with your edit, because you could potentially change a narrative, depending on how you put it together. How cognizant are you of that? And like, it's one of those situations that you see often in like fictional, newsroom dramas, where they're like, oh, well, he almost said what we wanted him to say, but if we just omit this, we could kind of give that impression. So in terms of that, how on top of the preservation of the original intent are you?
Oh, 100%. I would never splice, I did this to kill this guy.
We do that all the time in this podcast. So.
My head bops around a lot to save myself from being indicted.
That's just a basic ethics.
Yes.
In my point of view, in our show, we adhere to those codes of conduct.
Is that a Canadian thing too?
It should be every journalist, tell you the truth.
Should be.
But
is it? I guess, okay, as an outsider, as someone that's, moonlit over here in the good old Uncle Sam, do you think that there's a lack of ethics? Do you think that there are people out there getting it right? And like, if so, like, who's getting it right around here? And if you're in the United States, how the fuck do we in your opinion, how should we get our news so that we could be at least informed, so we can decide then where our bigotry and racism kind of fall into play?
Right. So I'm familiar. I don't get your 6 o'clock news, your 11 o'clock news. I don't get your NBC.
I never understand
news.
it either. It's fucking ridiculous.
So
I don't know why this is caused by cancer, but I drink the orange juice.
Yeah. But in my opinion, I think those newscasts are legit. Those newscasts are what you should be believing in, is like the network national primetime news.
They're still with piss and vinegar. They're hungry.
I don't watch enough American, like those type of newscasts to know. I'll watch more of the CNN just because it's a talk show, or Fox, and just see the craziness that's going on, because it's been a
like
soap
Rush
opera.
Limbaugh dying. I mean, how sad can 2021 possibly be?
It's a soap opera. It really has been a soap opera. And CNN used to be one of the best in the world. Like it
has changed a lot. I noticed, because I didn't watch for years, and then it was on. My mom had it on like a couple weeks ago, and I'm like, oh my gosh, the amount of opinion that's being infused into this is way more than it used to be.
Right.
It really is. It's like, it's almost comedy, really. It's
right.
like,
yeah.
Right. And I think that's where you need to make the distinction, is you have to be educated enough to know that that's opinion versus the news.
And you need a variety of sources. You need to do your own due diligence and make sure that even if you're getting somewhat, tainted information, as long as you check a number of places, you can kind of make a consensus.
Well, what's a really good way
idea.
to do it? I'd recommend going on Netflix and watching like the last 15 comedy specials and extrapolating the subtext of all of those, and then
you're right.
Find
absolutely,
because I find that it's really the comedians who are making all these funny jokes because people relate to them, but then they find out like, oh yeah, you're stupid. Here's why you're stupid. Because one of the things that's funny is to point out to people why they're stupid and inform them with information. Like literally everything that Dave Chappelle says is like, well, here's actually how it is, and then he just makes fun of everyone for not knowing things. So like, that could be a really good thing for you, because we're all stupid here, Paul.
I wouldn't say stupid. I think it's a lack of education. I think it's a lack of.
Well, it's so expensive to get educated, bro.
A lack of the ability to research and find your own information. I mean, it's true. Like if people just had the
we
resources
have YouTube,
to know.
Siobhán. We can research anything.
No, but it's something about the ability to filter out, like, I mean, I feel like if I watch or I read something.
Blocker.
No, but I know if I'm being like sold or emotionally manipulated by something, but I think a lot of people don't. And I think that's
A lot of
really
people-
hard. Like, how do you give people the resources to know how to have like an objective view of what is really happening and to filter out like all the bullshit?
The problem is people like hearing what they want to hear. So it's not
Right.
even that they're not even completely unaware that it's bullshit. They're just like, oh, I like this bullshit's nice.
Well, that's
I
the
want to hear more of
never-ending
that. You know?
shitstorm because CNN and Fox pander, and because of their diametric oppositions, they're able to create the dichotomy that panders to the hard right or to the hard left, and because of that, there is no Venn diagram where there's a middle, and that's kind of where I find a lot of the comedians are, because they will say, "Oh, I don't believe in guns, but like this is stupid about abortion." You know what I mean? Where like you have one station that really does pander to this, and the other one, and they're happy about it. They're synergistically surviving because the only way to create discourse that keeps the attention span of an American long enough to tell any kind of story beyond 90 seconds is to feed upon hatred. That's it.
Let's talk about one of the best newscasts, Weekend Update on Saturday Night Live. Right?
Oh, I agree.
I haven't watched that in years.
But who on Weekend Update?
Yeah.
Current Weekend Update? Are we talking like
Yeah.
Kevin Nealon?
You know
Are
what?
we talk-
I'm going to admit I'm still a bit of a Saturday Night Live fan. You know what? There's a lot of bad skits, but every now and then there's a good skit. I record it, watch it over the week. But the one thing I always go back to is a Weekend Update.
Yeah.
That's always a highlight of the show for me. Just
Oh my
record
gosh.
it, watch it this week, and take a look at Weekend Update.
We'll
Paul,
check
let
it
me
out.
ask you a question about audiences. So, like we were talking about, the news is very divisive in the U.S., and we've noticed, at least, on social media, that people have gotten further and further divided based on probably a lot of the division in the news stations and their perspectives. Do you see that in Canada, or does it seem like people are a little bit more united and on the same page in terms of their views of what's really happening in the world?
It's like night and day.
Really?
Oh yeah. So what's the best way to explain this?
Are you guys more like the United Provinces versus we're the United States, but we're really not united? But
No,
you
we're the
are?
divided
You're
states.
completely divided.
Right. So we're the divided states, and you're the United Provinces.
Right. Yes,
That
we
should be
do
called
have
Canada.
we have our political differences 100%. Excuse me, but I think there's an understanding between everybody, and there's like a common bond between everybody. There's not a black and white.
You guys all like hockey and Rush?
We do. We hockey, Rush. You got it. Tommy Chong.
Speaking
Oh,
of Tommy
yeah.
Chong,
Yeah.
Don't you know Tommy?
Not to jump on the question itself, but I do want to make sure that for our listeners and viewers, at the end of the last episode, we left a cliffhanger where Paul was going to tell us the one of the stickiest or most interesting episodes for people to kind of check out to kind of get a feel for what he does. So you want to let us know, the answer you came up with?
So yeah, just a quick answer on that. And it's not an investigation. This was more of a bringing a major news event to light and thinking of a creative way of doing that. And that was the national legalization of marijuana in Canada. So pot is legal everywhere across the country. And
You guys got fire butt up there, bro.
yeah, it's
Like fucking
everything.
fluorescent, like hurts my eyes, like special Canada battery bud.
And it comes from British Columbia, some of the best stuff in the world.
BCs, the
Yes.
beastas.
So I had to think of a creative way to be able to tell this story. And Tommy Chong, I thought he's the pot pioneer. Like if there's one guy that really drove home the movement, he got arrested. He went to jail because of it. He's Canadian. So I spent a bit of time with him, documented his life, him and Cheech and Chong. It's an interesting story. It's called The Pot Pioneer.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
that's not,
Where can we find the pot pioneer?
and you can find it on YouTube. So just, if
Okay.
you search up W5 official, you'll be able to see all of our investigations, all of our shows available. Hundreds of them are available. And, search for a topic that interests you, from murder mysteries to you name it. We've covered it. So
Wow, that's so
back to the divisiveness. In America is very divided, and Canada, I would say, is not.
Mm-hmm.
Of
Do you
course,
think the
there's-
news does play a role in that, or is that just more of a Canadian thing? Like, what would you attribute that to?
In my opinion, the news has played huge into the U.S. dividing more. But the one thing, the one thing that I've throughout my life hanging out with Americans is, if you're a Democrat, you'll be a Democrat for the rest of your life and probably never change. And if you're a Republican, there's no way you will become a Democrat. It's very party line. I could correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
What I've noticed is, and it might change with our generation, but what it used to be, I forget who said it. They said something like, if you're not a Democrat when you're young, you're heartless, and if you're not a Republican when you're older, you're an idiot. Like, it's like there's some saying like that, and I don't know what it is. I'll look it up at some point. But it's kind of that idea that Democrats have this idealism kind of outlook, but they're naive. And then you have Republicans, which are more, no, this is actually how the world is and it's how it's got to be.
My question is it a British thing? Because I go back to the great philosopher Roger Waters, who said, together we stand, divided we fall. But then Roger Waters later in life becomes this anti-Semite, anti-Zionistic, crazy fuckface. That likes to put swastikas on his fucking stage as he lip syncs Pink Floyd tunes as Dave Gilmour donates to like saving the world as he slowly fades into oblivion with Alzheimer's disease. So like, is that weird to you, Paul, that like, you listen to Pink Floyd growing up and like, together we stand, divided we fall, but then the guy that wrote it,
has taken the downhill.
But don't you feel like that's a metaphor for a lot of what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I think
you
I
say
think so.
one thing, but then the truth is you're just a fucking angry old man with really crazy ideas.
Some
and Dave
people
Gilmour was awesome.
and I do love Pink Floyd. So yeah, it's a good philosophy. It's interesting, but I've flip-flopped. I've gone liberal. I go back and forth. I go on who I feel will lead the country better, not on abortion rules. That's I can't believe that's still something in your elections. But you mentioned
you said you flip-flop, but you more like it seems more like you're making decisions based on what's in front of you.
Correct.
So when people say flip-flop, there's like this idea of like, oh, your entire belief system is now changed. Whereas I think it's more along the lines of, being able to make a informed decision based upon what is in front of you. And the fact that people aren't 100% liberal, 100% conservative, that there's different aspects of that. And it's almost, it's funny because if you talk to anyone, if you have a conversation, we're all having a conversation now, pretty much everyone is sitting there in that middle-ish area, a little this way, a little that way. And there might be a few, topics that will set people off, but you really only there's only this image of a huge wide gap because of things like the network news opinion shows that make it seem like if you're not yelling at the person on the other side, you're not a real American.
Well, it's also stuff like the miscommunication we have here, like saying defund the police, because when someone says something like defund the police, they immediately think that means we shouldn't have the police, versus saying, no, we want to reappropriate funds towards different task force.
It's not as catchy though.
That could maybe help you in different ways.
Yeah, but that's the problem with social media.
Worry about bullshit that they shouldn't be worrying about anyway, because like they have other things to do than the bullshit that they're doing.
And that messaging's wrong.
Yeah, well, a lot of the problem too, at least in my perspective, is that people don't want to spend as much time investing in consuming. They want to see something in 10 seconds. It's memeology. It's like, what's the hashtag, the byline, and
who should
and then
I
it's
be
like,
mad
okay,
at?
share, and then it's like,
Google
yeah, all of a
tells
sudden,
you who should be mad at very quickly.
Right, but then all of a sudden people are sharing something and it's like the game of telephone. By the end of the chain, it's like the last person doesn't even know what the original intention was.
The yellow in journalism. Because what you do is, like, again, you said you share something for Julian, not realizing it's a White Lives Matter thing that's actually a hateful horrible thing, but you're like, no, it's for a baby, because you're just vapid and you find something that hits home and you're seeing like the little picture, but you don't see the Tyrannosaurus Rex behind the baby.
Right. I think the networks that are causing all this chaos should not be called news anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In your opinion, what do you see, like, what could American news networks do, or like, what is the turning point before, because it could just run rampant and get out of control, where it's like, where do you even, it already is kind of out of control. Like, how can people turn it around to make,
like, do you
return
feel like,
back to some level of objectivity?
Like, do you feel like Fox is like the Montreal Canadiens, and that like, that maybe CNN's the Toronto Maple Leafs? And that the only way to understand the level of absolute stupidity that is just brought out in people, exercised like an evil fucking spirit, is to go when you see the Montreal Canadiens versus the Toronto Maple Leafs, and everyone's wasted at the end of that, and they're fucking kicking each other's asses outside. I feel like that's like an allegory for what American news is like. Do you feel like that's a fair thing as a third-party omniscient?
It is. And is there a solution to that? I don't have it.
Stop watching
Why not?
hockey.
What are you here for?
The question you ask is like, I feel like everything's so divided that, I like, things will get better, I think. I hope. Mm-hmm. But I don't have an answer to that question. I don't have an answer to. They need to make money.
Yeah, that's true.
And they're making money, so they're not going to change.
Taking news out of it, like I think about as an American, if you go to Boston or to New York, or then you go to LA or Nashville, the person that you meet in every city is so vastly different. As a Canadian, do you notice that? Because it's a comparably large country. Are Canadians more or less similar, or do you notice massive differences depending on their geographic area?
Massive differences. East Coasters are so different to West Coasters.
Okay, so you have a similar thing. Yeah,
absolutely. Northerners, Southerners, different types.
So it's kind of like oysters.
Everything, absolutely. East Coast oysters. West
you guys
Coast
are like mollusks.
The West Coast a little bit more salty.
Because I went up there one time and I tried Canadian bacon, and that's just a fucking lie. That's not bacon, bro.
It is bacon.
No, it's not. That's just fucking ham. That's very sad ham.
It's true. It is a part of the ham.
But it's the way that it's prepared, though,
It's just not bacon. Gordon Ramsay probably has my back on this, and I guarantee you he's not American.
He probably would have your back fully.
You guys are good on lots of things, but putting fat on everything's great.
What are the Canadian stereotypes as far as the regional aspect?
So before we get into that, I actually asked you guys if you had any Canadian stereotypes that you could sort of tell me about. And, does anybody want to get started on that? Like, what is your...
Do you find it ironic that Alanis Morissette won for best debut record when, first off, that was her third record, and her song Ironic was not ironic whatsoever?
I'm an Alanis fan.
And she toured with Vanilla Ice, another fucking famous Canadian, born on Halloween, nonetheless. Did you know
Canadian
that?
Power. I did not know that. But what's a stereotype when you think of Canada? Maybe coming from Florida, you might even have even more. Because
well, you know what's funny though? So I live in Florida now, but I'm originally from Michigan and Detroit. Okay. So I was, not that Windsor is Canada. It felt more like Detroit. But we would go into Canada all the time.
You're
honorary. Right, honorary. But my perspective was just that Canadians are similar to American Midwesterners, that very nice, like easy to get along with, chill, like love hockey. Like if like the culture, at least in terms of stereotypes, felt very similar to like Detroit people or Midwestern people. So that's my understanding of Canadians. Yeah,
so true. I noticed that too. Like, when you visit Minnesota, places, Michigan, Upper Peninsula.
I'll tell you, I went 3 summers up to Montreal to watch festivals because you guys in Canada, and obviously it's COVID right now, so fuck everything because I'd love to go. I'd go to a festival. I'd go to Bonnaroo at this point, and I fucking hate that thing. But you guys have the best. Like Rock Montreal or the Amnesia Festival. It's like you have Henry Rollins on one stage, but then it's Slipknot, but then it's Korn, but then it's like Rancid, and like it's unlike America. If you go to like Lollapalooza, where like if you're going from Lady Gaga to whatever Deadmau5, right? Like you're in like a herd where like literally you're being moved by the crowd. And like, if you're not tall enough, you could actually hyperventilate with the 107,000 people that are in Grant Park. But like in Montebello, Canada, it's fucking beautiful. All there is cows. There's no light because there's literally no street lamps. It's like totally dark at night. So like when you're watching Slipknot or Meshuggah, it's fucking blinding, and everyone's very well-natured. All the weed is spectacular, and it's like everything's far enough apart, and even these super huge bands, it's not so big there where you feel claustrophobic. It's like
So we
everyone's kind of
do
cool.
have a lot less people here. That's for sure.
No, but it's such a wonderful experience. But the one thing that was weird is one year I went up with my friend Garrett, and he's literally a bodybuilder. He's won all these competitions around here, and people in Canada looked at the physical fitness of this man like he was something completely abnormal. Like if you go like in Hollywood, California, and walk down the street and you're jacked, you're just one of like every dude there. Like you guys looked at him, and I said, "You guys,
this is
my
our
Canadian
bicep curl."
Yeah, dude.
Nice.
Literally the fucking guards. I remember we were at a Megadeth mosh pit, right? And some kid pushed me, and like my buddy Garrett comes in and literally just goes like this, and he could bench over 450 pounds. Just goes like this and pushes a whole wall of people down by himself. And the guys that were there, like supposed to protect people, were half his size. They're just like, I'm not fucking with this dude. Like in Canada, whereas here, like there's definitely dudes looking just to murder you, even if they're small. Like very different disposition.
People are very much more chill, I think. Yes.
Why do you think that is? Like, is that just like how everyone's raised, or is it the lifestyle? Like, where does that come from?
That's a good
Amount of
question.
strip clubs.
Yes, like in Quebec especially, and Quebec, I absolutely love Quebec. I went to university there. I lived there for a good 7 years. I absolutely love Quebec, and like the way of life there is, you want to live your life. You want to enjoy life. 5 o'clock every day, people didn't want to work overtime, and people left. People went for a drink after work. That was common practice, a very European way of living.
Yeah.
Which, like life is more important than certain those things. You don't need the most expensive car. You don't need the biggest house. You just want to have, you just rather be mentally happy. I think that might play into things a little bit.
We've been hearing about this quality of life thing. It's funny because so many of the successful people we've talked to, part of the success is because they do what they love, but it's because they're able to work so much and so intensely focus on it because it's building the quality of their life. So like you finding out about things, even though you say you're obsessive about it, it's like me talking about guitars. I'm obsessive about it. I literally will be like looking at guitars while I'm talking to people about like super important things because I'm obsessed. So like when I talk to people and they ask me questions, it's like I have an absolutely abnormal understanding of that. But like that's about leveraging your strengths, and I have a real appreciation for someone like you who's able to focus on the meta and the subtext and be able to extrapolate that and put it in a meaningful way where idiots like myself can smoke weed and go, wow, I learned something.
Yeah, that's awesome. Cory, how about you? What's your like?
So to get the most information topically, I think that what I would like to hear about is there's this huge issue amongst a lot of Americans with in regards to universal health care.
Yes.
So what does that look like, and how has it ruined your life?
You know what? I would say,
Are those your real teeth?
these are my real teeth. I would say it is probably the most important thing that makes us Canadian is that no matter how rich you are, no matter how poor you are, you'll be accepted in our medical system by the same doctor. So
Yeah.
So that's actually important because I feel like I voted no on number one, and like they said that wasn't important.
It's to me, there are some problems to the system. 100%. It's not perfect. It's definitely not perfect. But I've never had to take out my credit card ever to get medical care.
You guys have credit cards up there in Canada?
We do have credit cards. I take out a health card, and that charge goes right to the government. I never see a penny of anything. I could go to 50 doctors if I want. I would never abuse the system like that. But, anything you need.
It's funny you say that because I remember a vet. I met this vet at the Amnesia Rock Festival, and he was smoking me up on some fucking amazing fireweed, and he was telling me the government bought it for him. He goes, the government appropriates me weed. And I'm like, and that took me a second. Wait, the government, because you served the government, you now have weed bought for you.
Right.
And I was trying to figure out like what synapses needed to fire in my brain to like make a correlation. And I still haven't been able to. Can you illuminate that for me? Is that a thing?
Yes. If you have a prescription for it and you're covered, then it's considered a medication here.
My prescription's for cowbell, so.
Well,
but you know what? It's not all roses. Like I'm not going to sugarcoat the system. There are some issues. Wait times are a little bit longer in cases.
What does that look? Can you be a little more specific about?
Yeah. So emergency medicine is always instant. Mm-hmm. If you need something, instantly you'll get it. Like if you're life or death, you'll always get it.
Mm-hmm.
But say stuff that's a little bit less life-threatening. Say you need a hip replacement. You may have to wait that extra month or so to get that hip replacement.
Does cold hard loonies get you faster service in Canada?
Not zero.
So you can't bypass the system like you can in the United States, because I know like you can go into any place in like in LA and go to the best medical center and be like, yo, dude, I want a head transplant. And they're going to be like, it's 7-year wait. And you'd be like, pull out fucking Chris Woodrow Wilson $100,000 bills. And be like, how'd you get these? I'd be like, bro, they're going back to the government. And then you get whatever you want.
Nope.
But
that doesn't exist. Go ahead. No. And so that doesn't exist here.
An interesting thing you said. So do you notice that the standard of care among all areas in Canada is the same? Because one thing that you said that made me think is, here in the US, like depending on the area you live in, you may not have access to a really good doctor. If you live in a small town, like maybe the type of doctors that go to that hospital don't have as much experience. They're just not as elite, I guess. And so you do kind of have to pay more to go to another place. Is it basically standardized in terms of the quality of care you receive, regardless of where you go?
No, like you are correct in that assumption that you go to a small town 12 hours north of Toronto,
mm-hmm.
you're not going to have the cancer care center that you have in downtown Toronto. Okay. So yes, there is that issue. But if you want to get that care, you go to Toronto, and a lot of times they'll send you to Toronto and pay for you to be in Toronto to get that care.
So so in other words, you have access to it regardless.
Yeah, so small towns.
So you have a
small
choice.
Towns have that issue.
So you have a choice if you want to get out of your small town. You can go.
Yes,
you can go to Toronto and get the cancer treatment that you need.
Correct. All the big teaching hospitals are all in Toronto, all that stuff.
Because I've watched all these commercials on television in the United States where you see all these children that or people talking about how they're dying, and they're basically just ads for, you want to live longer, you have cancer too, and basically saying, hey, come to us, like we could make your quality of life better. And it's like, why aren't you helping everybody this way if we have this ability?
Right. And it's again, coming from my point of view, and the US, I think there's not many countries in the world that have your type of system. Most systems are universal.
Special.
Most systems are universal to some point. Yes, our taxes are higher. I pay for it,
mm-hmm.
but I'm fine with that. I'm totally fine with that.
Yeah, absolutely. What about, not to change gears, but what about education? I'm curious about your experience going through the school system in Canada. Your thoughts on like the level of education you got, your access to higher education.
I would say the education is the same, on par, is the same.
As public school system in
correct,
the US?
Bro, I'm in Boston, man. You ain't the same as me.
But here's
I'm the best in the fucking world because we're Boston, bro.
Here's the one thing.
We're Boston. We're the best.
Different.
We're the best.
Boston is
the best.
But it depends what part of Boston too.
Except that we're stupid and we gave away
All right,
Tom
Ben,
Brady.
shut up. Let him talk.
Here's the one thing that I've noticed, because I've spent so much time in the US and a lot of my good friends are American. We learn a more global education. We study the world, whereas I feel in the US, you study the US and that's it. You don't really go outside your borders.
That explains a lot.
I think it does. It's.
But why, as a good, warm-blooded red American, should I fucking care about what's going up there in Canada with your fucking
I think but you know what? I think your
fries?
quality of life is better when you have a perspective of other. It's not necessarily that you need to go
No,
anywhere.
I want the Canadian
but,
to answer
Okay,
this.
yeah, go
Siobhán.
ahead. Sorry.
The Canadian needs to tell us.
So sorry, what was the question?
I'm saying, why,
Yes.
as a good, warm-blooded American, and that's not American, that's an American,
Yes.
should I give a flying fuck about what's going up there with you guys that put mayo on fries?
The importance of global education, in other words.
Let's not just talk about Canada. Let's talk about Europe. Let's talk about Africa. Let's talk about Asia. Why should you know about those other countries? Because our world is so interconnected. The broader your horizon, the better you will be.
Yeah. And well, so when you went to move on from that, when you went to college, can you talk about that? You went to university in Canada?
Yeah, I went to school in Canada. So I grew up in Toronto, totally English speaking, very, it's like New York of Canada. Then I went to Montreal, which is totally French. Europe.
Was French part of your education growing up?
We
like
do.
learning that as a language? Okay.
We do. We have to learn French. Mandatory. We're a bilingual country. We have to learn English and French. So it was great. Like I loved it. And it opened up my horizons to like, this is a good way of life. Europeans know what they're doing.
Yeah. And was your college education, a university education paid for also by the government, or what's the system
very,
like?
Very inexpensive. Yeah. They subsidize probably 80% of it, 70% of it.
So you're only in debt
and that's
for the
across
next 20
the board.
years?
Exactly. My tuition was probably like $6,000 a year.
Mine was like 6,000 like a week.
Yeah, no, but I mean, mostly subsidized though. I mean, that's huge.
It is
because
mostly
there's
subsidized.
a massive problem with student debt in the U.S. I mean, across the board.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't really have the private system of schools that you have. They're all pretty much state. They all, they're all sort of on par with funding and stuff like that. There definitely are some better schools, but they all get relatively the same amount of funding.
Yeah. Oh, it's so interesting. I actually went to a state college, so, public, in other words.
Yeah.
And I think the tuition for an in-state resident in the state of Michigan was like almost $30,000 a year. And if you were from out of state, it was like $50,000 a year.
Yeah.
And that's like, you're getting like public state college education.
The irony of my elitism is that I exhausted my trust fund to not even get a college degree. That's true. It's true. My mom's totally grimacing right now. She's so upset. But it's true. Like, I literally wish I could go back and grab myself before I went to Northeastern for $40,000 a trimester, literally in 2000, and like be like, no, why don't you just take that and just buy yourself a Les Paul that's worth $40,000? It'll be worth $500,000 by the time we're talking about this again. Because I literally was like, because my parents, and I don't blame them at all, were from a society where you went to school and you go to school and you go to the best school that you can get into, and that's going to give you the best place to go. And now it's like, if you go to Berklee School of Music, which is, $250,000 education, you're probably not going to get any better of a teaching degree than you're going to if you go to, Worcester State College. It's just up to you. It's literally up to you. And it's crazy the difference in prices. And even then, Worcester State College is ridiculous money by comparison to what you just said.
The whole university thing is it's tricky because yes, it can pay off, and a lot of times it can't. But I feel like how it pays off is the drive you have coming out of school.
Yeah.
And if you know how the world is
how
about
you utilize
hustle,
it. Yeah.
You got to hustle from day one.
It also depends on which area you're going into. I mean, a lot of occupations and career paths, it doesn't matter where your degree is. When they're hiring, they don't give a shit. They like you send your resume and they like skim past the education part and they look at, what do you know? What have you been doing for the past few years?
If Ludacris taught me anything, it's to have hoes in different area codes.
That's a great song, actually.
Can we agree on anything, Canada? Ludacris is one of the very, very best.
You always need a place to stay whenever you travel.
Oh my gosh. Well, Paul, let me
yeah.
ask you. Let me ask you a question. Speaking of, we started with Canadian stereotypes. Do you have any preconceived notions of Americans or American stereotypes, or just Canadians and what they think of Americans in general?
Cue David Bowie music.
Okay, yeah. So,
I can't wait to hear.
from an outsider's point of view, you always hear Americans are very loud. So a little bit self-centered at times.
Accurate.
Yeah.
Generally true.
Yeah. Might not be the brightest bulb in the world stage.
Also accurate.
But, again, those are just stereotypes and not how I feel.
No, sure. It's interesting.
Yeah.
It's funny how they're all negative.
So wait, how do you
Which
feel
is
about
not
me?
untrue. But
I love you guys.
Well, so where do people up in Canada land, like how do they experience Americans if they've never been to America? So are they getting it just from pop culture and film, TV, movies, news? Like where is that image coming from?
That's exactly it. It's coming
Yeah.
from sitcoms. It's coming from news. It's coming from
So you think we really are Fuller House?
It's coming from TikTok.
Oh gosh.
oh my
We're
God.
sorry.
So like, that's where it's coming from.
TikTok blows my mind. Like I've avoided it for a long time. I was like, you know what? I'm going to download it. And I'm like, this is what's been going on all these years.
Does
like
your hedgehog have more followers than I again have on
No,
Facebook?
I'm like, I started an account, but I'm like, I'm really afraid to even engage in it because it just seems like you either have to immerse. Yeah, like the incentives are to just like do all this like crazy kind of stupid shit. I'm like, what does this lead to? I'm not sure what the end the
at
end
least
result
having your
of
account
TikTok
disabled
is.
and then finding a gun and being someone.
No, but like, what would happen if all of a sudden TikTok went away and it like disappeared and then
There'd be
people
lots
are
of
Something
little
else.
kids that
There'll be
would have-
another one that pops up. There'll be something else that comes.
There
I
will
guess,
be.
but
In terms of social media and aspects like that, amongst young people in Canada, because those social platforms are borderless, have you noticed, or is there a national trend towards Americanization, like stuff like that amongst young teens and kids that are on like the TikTok? Because I know that there's people all around the world that can access this stuff. So are they seeing these trends, and are we spreading some of our maybe less fortunate culture outwards?
You know what? I'm actually going to say that it's bringing other cultures other than American cultures in. I think it's bringing in more of a global perspective. Like you want to look up fashion. You want to have like a fashion stream. That's not really coming from the US that much anymore.
Right.
You want, like when I've dibble dabbled in it, it's been actually a little bit less Americana and more of outsider influence. So because it is so global and it goes by interest. You search up what you want and interest. Same with Instagram and stuff. And like they're by sheer volume, Americans are probably the biggest contributors to social media, just by sheer volume of the amount of people that have cell phones. The
amount of people that aren't in school aren't working.
Yeah, exactly.
There aren't a bunch of Chinese kids trying to get those tickets to the Patriots game away from me. There's got to be more of those than.
And you know what? And ultimately, it's all algorithms on what is curated.
Yeah.
What is curated for you? It's hard to answer that question because you're fed what they want you to see.
Do you think MK Ultra is going to stop us at any point now?
Who's MK Ultra?
You don't know about MK Ultra?
It's an obscure reference to something that happened a long time ago, and it has nothing to do with this conversation.
That Paul doesn't know that.
I don't know.
No, okay. It was when MK Ultra was the mind experiments that the government in the United States did in like the 40s and 50s, and they gave random people acid, and they did like occipital lobotomies and all kinds of crazy stuff, and psychic and astral projection stuff. And it was the first time where actually Nixon admitted to destroying 160,000 pages, everything from aliens and all this. But they admitted to doing all kinds of tests, like actually when a lot of the doctors from the Nazis, like guys like the Dr. Joseph Mengeles kind of people came back. The United States employed them. They're like, we got a job for you. It's working for MK Ultra, and we're gonna make you do weird shit to our people. And that actually happened.
Yeah, I didn't know the name of that. I knew the operation.
It's also a type of acid.
Yeah. Interesting.
And a song by Muse.
Yeah.
So there's that.
So here's a quick question for you guys. You know, during the pandemic, stuck at home, probably been exploring a little bit of music that you wouldn't normally listen to. Have you discovered anybody that you would be like, this is interesting, and I wouldn't normally listen to this, but I kind of enjoy this?
I wish that was the case. It's this past year or so since everything's gone down. I think for all of us, maybe not. We haven't been in our usual routines, but we've all been busy. And I can speak for myself saying that I haven't listened to a goddamn thing other than shit that I've been working on. And I wish I would love to like listen and find new music and stuff, but it's just that's a luxury that I have not had. And it's not complaining. I've been very fortunate to be incredibly busy with the podcast, with the band, with everything going on. But no, I aside from like every now and then I'll have, I'll tell my Echo to play like a new music or something, and I'll let it go in the background. I might hear a song every now and then, and that just a song, and I'll make note of it. But no, my music discovery days are far behind me at this point.
Yeah, I'll say not a specific artist, but I've been really busy as well, but I have been taking like master classes and different like interactive things. And I started taking a class through Berkeley in Boston that's like electronic music. So I've started listening to a lot of like drum and bass, like heavy groove style stuff just to get used to like writing. But I mean, no particular artist, but definitely trying to.
Does it come with free ecstasy?
No.
Makes it way more fun.
That's for the final.
Benny, how about you?
You're right, for the final.
Oh, for me? So I'm in the same boat as them for the most part, but like when the pandemic first started, and everyone was home and we were all kind of like living atemporally, like outside of space and time, and like before you kind of knew what to do with yourself. I had just gotten a new record player because I needed to listen to the test vinyl for our first Lost Symphony record, which is actually our sponsor, LostSymphony.com, Lost Symphony. Subscribe to 2020-D.
Yeah, that's why we're all here. That's how we're all related, by the
Lost
way.
Symphony. And so one of the first things I did when I was younger, I was smart. I saw this happening. I went to my favorite record store, a place called Albums that no longer exists, but was around for like 50 years. And they were selling records like for $1.99 a piece when they were blowing them out, and you really could go in there and buy like 100 of them for like $50 if you just like took a stack up, and they'd just be like, whatever, take them. So I have like every Van Halen record, every Queen record, every Pink Floyd record, like Yes, Journey, and so I haven't listened to a bunch of them. So I started going through those records, and like I listened to Van Halen 2 from start to finish, which I don't really think I ever did that like on CD. I always had like mixes and stuff like that. I don't think I listened to like Yes, I wasn't super into before. So like I listened to a lot of these records that I hadn't heard in a long time, and certainly not in an A-B format, and I was able to critically listen to them. And that lasted for like the very beginning of the pandemic, before everyone realized like you should pivot and do something else or figure out something to do with your time versus just watching things on Netflix incessantly. So that's when I went back to working mindlessly with these two.
I'll tell you a little bit of discovery that I came up with, is that I was never big into electronic music, that type of thing, but I did discover Rufus Du Sol, which is take a listen. And you know what? Like, it's very chill, down-tempo, trippy, dreamy electronic music that, reminds me, it's not like Floyd, but it gives you that same feeling.
Interesting. Okay.
I would take a listen.
I like that. That sounds
Are you digging
cool.
this electronic class, Siobhán? Because I feel like if I was as talented as you, and I'm not even a monochrome of that, I would be like, this is so below me.
You know what? For me, a lot of it was about the production skills and just understanding how to use
mastering,
like
so
synthesis.
It looks like a giant fucking square.
Well, that, but also just like learning how to use the tools that exist like in the audio processing software, because that's my weakness, is like just being like for me,
So
classes are the best way. Yeah, the engineering side of it. But also it does, I mean, you're right. Like when we're musicians, like so much of our time is spent, like I'm the same. I'm always working on music. And then the second I have free time, I'm listening to a podcast.
Are you going to cheat on your final with Brock and have him? Because since he's so good
No, he tries to get in. And I'm like, no, the point of me taking this class is so that I'm no longer dependent on you.
Such an asshole.
To fix all my shit.
He's angry.
But yeah, it's no, for me, a lot of it too was just being forced into being exposed to other genres. Because without like a deadline or like the threat of having or the threat of being graded on something, it's true. Like I just work on music, and then when I have free time,
if you ever want to be inspired, Siobhán, by electronic music, go watch First off, it's a master class by Deadmau5, and he's
I've watched it. Yeah.
Okay, so I love this.
Terrible.
So he's sitting. Yeah, so he's sitting in this room with like,
terrible.
This is $1 million with
Not
the
particularly
synthesizers.
helpful. Yeah.
I don't know what any of this stuff.
no information
I don't
whatsoever.
know what any of this does. I'd play a keyboard, but I don't really know how to. And it's like, oh my God, this is the guy that sells gajillions of records and puts a goddamn thing on his head that everyone. And he's got the most amazing studio. He doesn't know how to do anything with.
Thanks, Paul.
He's figured it out. But my whole discovery on that was working from home. I need to tune things out. So I was looking for something chill, down tempo, and I found it.
Good to
Take
know.
a listen.
One more time. What was the name of it?
Rufus Du Sol.
Okay, I have to look this up because that sounds like my vibe. Because I like Pink Floyd and I love down tempo stuff.
Down tempo, like classy, not bang, 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 bang.
Yeah.
Did you ever listen to Pink Floyd with Syd Barrett? Because you know what? It's not down tempo. It was funny. I was watching it the other day, and the live performance with Syd Barrett is a song called Apples and Oranges. And I'm like, wait a minute. And it totally reminded me of like the Flower People and Spinal Tap, because they're sitting there and like, first off, if you see Roger Waters in 1967, he looks like he's like Neolithic. Like his jaw's like pointed the wrong way. Like he's going apples and oranges, apples and oranges for 6.5 minutes. And I'm like, oh my God, that's Floyd. And that, they weren't always like, is there anybody?
Let me ask you another quick music question. Is the album dead? Like where an album starts from, it's a story. Mm-hmm. Like where you have a classic album where you have a beginning, middle, end, and you can listen to the whole album and be complete.
I'm going to answer this one because I remember when I actually went to camp, the first time I ever listened to an album like that, they played Tommy in our bunk like 20 times in a row, like incessantly. And like you were told, like everyone's like, all right, whatever. And we just kept playing Tommy. And I knew the whole record, it was ingrained in my mind. And I was like, this is the most insane 73.5 minutes of my life. And first off, the answer is yes, the album is dead in the sense that like, if you look at the Billboard charts and like everything's singles and nobody does that. But Lost Symphony, we functioned under the premise that I guess our niche would actually prefer an album. So our albums all have interludes between them. They all have sound design. Like they all have different themes that kind of lead into other things. And there is a distinct side A and a distinct side B. And there's multiple times that we sat there in a studio, Cory and myself, saying, if we add another minute to this, we may not be able to put it on one record. Yeah. So like, we are very cognizant of it, and I think that now it's becoming cooler to become an album person, and like you see all these younger generations going out and spending $30. It's funny to go back, and I bought Kiss Alive for $1.99, and now it's like $29.99 for the reissue, and then $39.99 for the actual shitty beat up one that I have that I bought for $1.99. And it goes to show you that like now it's cool to listen to albums. So I hope, and this is the premise that we function under, that there is a group of people that, especially with the insurgence of technology and headphones, because like remember like when albums started to die, it's because people had earbuds, MP3s were encoded, sound quality sucked. Now we're back to beats, we're back to noise canceling this, we're back to 43-inch, fucking titanium, neodymium magnet things. So everything sounds good. So these kids actually have a discerning ear. So people are getting more into production. There are classes that are much more about discernment. So I absolutely think people are going to go back and go, why was Dark Side of the Moon on the charts for 27 fucking years? And if you go watch the video of how they made it, because there's a VHS out there about it. It's fucking brilliant, and it's so antiquated by today's society because you could just do it all with like 2 plugins, and they did it all by plugging in different things and oscillators and crazy shit and taking drugs and fucking coming back and transcendental medicine and fucking crazy shit. But it really, people can't create that magic, and it's very hard to think. It's very, very selfish to think that people are going to care about your record. But I hope that people do listen to a record in the same way that you're suggesting. One day.
One day. I hope
someday.
so too.
On
That's
that
a
note,
long answer.
I have an opinion about it.
Yeah, clearly. Paul, thank you for actually elevating our discussion on this episode.
Yeah, it was
getting us
awesome
to
to
more
talk to
interesting
you.
things than we would ever come up with. This has been amazing, man. We appreciate your time coming on. We appreciate learning about you and your background and what you do. And what you do is amazing. And keep it
So
up.
cool,
and,
yeah.
And for anyone up in Canada, check out, was it W5? Is that?
You got it.
And on
anybody
YouTube,
anybody in the world can watch on YouTube.
yeah.
Yeah.
Not to be
I'm gonna check
confused
it
with
out.
W9, which I use to
Right.
make sure all
Yeah.
of my doors are not noisy. Thank you. If you guys want to endorse
That's
us,
WD-40.
whatever.
Yeah,
Oh,
W9 is the
my
tax
fucking
form.
thing I send for my taxes. See, this is my Tommy Chong thing. That's what it all
Maybe you
came
should go
to.
back to school then.
Yeah.
To university or to school.
Probably.
Thank you
school.
so much, Paul. Like, honestly, Paul and I have been friends for so long, and it's so good to see you. First off, doing something so selfless. You've never changed your personality as far as like your character and your depth of character, and you're always questioning. And like, we very much appreciate people demystifying things in this industry, and it's really cool because I really think that you have a great perspective, and our guitar player in Lost Symphony is from Canada, and we do kind of have a thing that everybody up there loves, hockey, which you've clearly displayed, and you all have like the most even temperament, and like I could yell at Kelly forever, who's like the greatest guitarist. He's like, yeah, man, that's cool. Oh, yeah, no, that's fine. I'm gonna go teach a lesson, and I was reading a book, and my cat needs to be fed, but I'll see if I have time for that. He says it slower because I can't speak as slowly as he does. But like, I really appreciate that you guys. If the Stereotype's gonna be smart, mid-tempoed, like really well informed, then
I'll take
if you're
it.
guilty,
Yeah.
then thank you. All hail Canada. Is that like something I'm gonna get like shut down on the American, like on Spotify, like by saying all hail Canada?
Listen, Canada
Hail
sounds like a
Canada!
nice place to be.
Canada.
Sounds pretty nice.
Yeah. You're an honorary Canadian growing up in Michigan.
True. Yeah.
There
Felt
you go.
close enough.
Yeah.
You're like the taint of Canada.
That's lovely. On that note, check
Check out
out
2020
2020,
-D, please, and check out Paul Haber and his show W5.
Thank you,
I say that
guys.
as if it hasn't been around since the dawn of time, but we're just Americans.
I know. I
so
can't
we
wait
don't
to
care
watch
about
some of
anything
these
but
stories.
ourselves.
Yeah.
So go
Exactly.
watch something that isn't
Take
like
care.
divisive.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul. Amazing.
Friction makes good music. I mean,
Ask Van
there's
Halen.
been a million, right? Ask Van Halen, ask Aerosmith, ask the Beatles, ask the Police, ask any fucking band under the sun. And there's
the Joe Perry
people that,
Project.
they get along, and sometimes they don't get along, but sometimes that's the best combination of people, and things come out of it that wouldn't have come out of two guys who
Wings.
got along all the time.
Well, that explains
True.
a lot about Ben, because if anything describes Ben, it's friction in general.
Yes. Well,
So-
I'm ribbed for your pleasure.
My quote about Ben is that somebody said about somebody else, I don't know who it was, but they said that this person gets the full range of emotions from me. And that's how I feel about Ben. There's not a lot of people that get the full range of emotions from me.